Greetings from the City of Brotherly Love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de USA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Tenemos una invitada especial, Marilyn Rodríguez, controlando la máquina digital, y nuestros invitados especiales, Kelly Lee, Chief Cultural Officer of the City of Philadelphia. She was appointed by Mayor Kenney. She leads the city Philadelphia Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, which closes the gap in access to quality cultural experiences and creative expression through the support and promotion of arts, culture, and the creative industries. So, thanks to Kelly, and full disclosure, we are friends. We've been friends for a long time.
And neighbors.
And neighbors. And Kelly has quite an impressive resume. And thanks to Kelly, we have a special guest today. She helped me to secure the presence in our program of Warren Oree, who is, well, I will let Kelly tell us who he is, but he's quite a personality. He's a composer, a bassist, educator. He's a producer. And I had the opportunity of meeting him recently at a concert. So, Kelly, welcome to our program. And again, thank you for bringing Warren Oree to my attention.
Yeah, you're welcome. What Fernando's referring to is that a group of us had the pleasure of going to Woodmere Museum in Chestnut Hill for an outdoor concert where Warren and his group, the Arpeggio Jazz Ensemble, was doing performances by Bob Marley. So it was a really great event. And one of the things that we love about the Arpeggio Jazz Ensemble, and we work with them often, is that, you know, they bring people together. I mean, just when we sort of look at the diversity of people who are at that event, sort of sitting in lawn chairs and sort of having this great cultural experience together, you know, it was a great moment. And actually, it's interesting because we started doing live events again in April during Jazz Appreciation Month, and the Arpeggio Jazz Ensemble, they were one of the first groups that we booked, and they did a performance at the Cherry Street Pier. And it was very emotional. You know, the band was so excited to be in front of a live audience again, because that was one of their first live performances. And being in the audience, like that was our first sort of venture out, after being in, lockdown for about a year. So yeah, and that's the point of music. That's the point of arts. It brings people together. It brings joy, and we need that now more than ever.
Yeah, well, I hope that continues, no? Because now we have a sort of a resurgence of COVID with a new a new version of it, the Delta version, and it's causing a lot of trouble, especially in some of the states where there's a large number of people unvaccinated. So that's a big problem. Yeah. Anyway, so before we go on, I'll bring Warren's bio notes. I mean, it's huge. I mean,
it's very long.
Book about this man. In 1975, he joined the group Weusi Mutrubi. And in 1979, he started the group that he leads today, the Arpeggio Jazz Ensemble, which Kelly mentioned. In addition to performing with Arpeggio, Warren has toured and recorded with Jamaluddin Takuma and Basso Nouveau, Khan Jamal. Bueno, es una lista muy larga. Es a long list of performances. He has toured Europe, South America, the Caribbean, and throughout the US. Not only does he perform on stage, Warren is also busy behind the scenes, composing and producing. He was co-producer of the 2003 Philadelphia Jazz and Poetry Festival. Wow, I remember that. That was a big event. And from its beginning to the end, he was producer, designer, and artistic director of the West Oak Lane Jazz and Arts Festival. So he's been on the cultural scene in Philly for a long time, and great highlights of his pedigree, his bio is just amazing. And so we're proud to have him, and we're waiting for Warren to join us anytime, and I think he is, in fact.
How you doing?
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, fine, thank you. We just made a brief introduction of you and Kelly Lee, who is with us today.
Well,
and well, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Well, it's an honor. I appreciate anything that has to do with the cultural scene, particularly here in Philly. And I appreciate Kelly's just her drive, her go-to, because she recognizes the true value of culture. And I appreciate you inviting me. I mean, it's just a beautiful thing, and I don't take it for granted. I really dig it. Really do.
Well, to begin with, I want to say that we were thoroughly we enjoyed that concert at the museum that we just attended with Kelly and another group of our friends. That was terrific. That was supremely entertaining, and it just we were happy to have that because, as Kelly mentioned, this was a sort of a return to this type of programming that we missed so much.
Yes. Well, I tell you, I know you all missed it, but you better believe we, as the artists, definitely missed it for a couple of reasons. But it is very medicinal. The arts, whether it's music or painting or dancing, whatever you're doing that's culturally related, is like medicine. And I just want to say, before I say anything else, I am so fortunate to work with the people that I do, because they really make it easy for me. They make it, it's one thing to have these concepts, these ideas of, well, I'm going to put on a festival, I'm going to put on this presentation. But then if you have no one to implement it, what's the point? So fortunately, I'm working with people who, not only the artists I work with, but my partner, Graciela. We have our company, Lifeline Music Coalition. And so I'm able to work with people who, like me, don't have a lot of time. And so I can call up the sax man and say, hey, man, I want to do this thing on Cannonball. So blah, blah, blah. And next thing I know, 2 in the morning, I'll get this phone call and it'll be like, bop, bop, dee, dee, bop, do that. And it'll be like, well, what do you think? I say, that's cool, because he knows I'm up, you know? So, I mean, it's just, it's a great time. And so to be back on the scene and again, spreading medicine is just beautiful. I really, really am happy about it. Very, very happy.
So Warren, let's because I always do things backwards in my show. So
that's all right. That's cool.
Are you originally from Philadelphia?
Yes, I was born in Philly, but I spent like the first maybe 20 years here. Did a little time in the military, and then when I got out, I moved to New York for about a year, and I traveled around to New Orleans and stuff like that. But which is interesting, during this time I wasn't playing music. I didn't start playing music till I was 25 years old, because without getting into too much detail, I was a crazy man on the streets. And
Shocking, Warren. That is just hard to imagine.
so I was that guy where you might have walked across the street if I was coming your way. But but the music at age 25, I was coming out of some serious problems. Uh, uh, and I met this guy. I didn't meet him. I peeped into his store. He had a record store at 52nd and Larchwood called Soul Brothers Productions.
Mm.
And it was a record store. But he was a piano player and he had this little upright piano in it. So I just peeked in there and, he turned around, looked at me. He said, "Oh, you play?" I said, "Nah, man." And he asked me a question that changed my whole life. He said, "If you could play, what instrument would you play?" Now, prior to this, now again, I'm 25, so I was old enough to have gone in clubs and everything. So prior to this, I would go check out jazz bands, and I always liked the bass player. To me, the bass player was the coolest cat on the bandstand. And I mean the upright bass, the real bass, I call it. And I would always go to these clubs and I'd see the bass player. I'd be like, whoa, man, look at this guy. He's so cool. So I told this guy, I said I would play a bass. And then he said, "So why don't you get one?" And I'm like, "Oh, wait a minute. First of all, man, I'm 25 years old. I don't know that you act like you telling me to go down the street and get a pack of chewing gum or something. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to get a bass." So he just kind of scrutinized me for a minute. Then he said, "Well, I guess you don't want to play." Now that thing hit me like a brick. And I went back. I was living at an apartment at 49th in Baltimore. I went back to my apartment. I thought about this for like 2 weeks. So I go back to this guy's store. I said, "Where would I get a bass?" And he said, "Oh, you changed your mind." I said, and he said, "I'll take you to this place at 12th and Federal called DeLuca and Sons." And I walked in there with him and I saw these basses. And this one bass, she looked at me and I looked at her and she said, "Come here." And I went over to her and I touched her, and we've been together ever since. And
Wow.
it was love at first touch. Let me tell
But
you.
Warren, the question is, why didn't you pick up a smaller instrument?
Like I said, to me, they didn't. I often, now believe me, I ask myself that same question now when I have to walk 2 blocks to get to the club. But it was just the bass to me always fascinated me. And I'm gonna be honest, it wasn't so much the sound, although of course I loved the sound of the bass, but it was that look. It was that swag that these bass players had. I said, "Oh man, that's what I gotta do." So, but when I went over and touched that woman bass, when I went over and touched her, I knew it was more than the look. It was the feel. Because as soon as I touched her, it was almost like as if she said, "Where you been?" I said, "Where you been?" You know?
Warren, it's so funny that you describe it that way because when I was laughing with Fernando and his wife and our friends when we were watching you at Woodmere, and it's like you have a relationship with your bass. Like I
Yeah.
think I even joked with you. I was like, "How does he make everything sound so raunchy?" And now that you describe your introduction to the bass, it's all coming together now. That's that unique arpeggio Warren Oree bass sound is
Oh
the
wow,
sound of your love
that's
with
it,
this
baby.
instrument.
That's it.
I love it.
It's just honesty and it's raw. And now I'm gonna tell you something that's interesting about the bass. My bass, see, because like I said, I didn't go to school, like music school early on, so I didn't know what a bass was really supposed to be like. It turns out the bass I have what they call a very high action, which means the strings are very high from the fingerboard, which makes it very difficult to play. But I didn't know that. To me, I thought that's how it's supposed to be. So I'm playing, it's like running with weights on. I'm playing this bass. So now when I go to jam sessions and cats, when you had a jam session, the other people jamming can play on your instrument. And I've had bass players say, "Man, I can't play this. I can't." And I had one bass player, Mike Boone, a good friend of mine, a great Philly bass player. He said, "Man, I could do the limbo under those strings, man." He said, "How how do you play this?" And I said, hey man, this is what I learned on, you know. So
Right.
and I had a situation once at the North Sea Jazz Festival when it was in The Hague in Holland. So like at the North Sea Festival, it's a great festival, you know, everybody's playing. But at the end of the festival, each night, that's when the party starts. So we all stayed in this place called the Congress Hotel. And at in the basement of the hotel, that's when the jam sessions would be all night long of all the musicians. It was, you know, Winton and that time Max Roach was living, Wayne, so everybody. So it was this Russian bass player. They were all trying to use his bass, but he was the only one that could play it. He says, no one can play my bass. My action is too high. No one can play it. I said, man, let me see something here. He said, oh, you cannot play this bass. I grabbed his bass. I said, oh, come on, man. He says, I do not believe it. You are so so I'm really fortunate that I learned on a bass that I didn't realize the action was so high because it gives me a good sound, a real strong, like a Charlie Mingus heavy sound. You know, I like the presence of a bass. I don't like to see basses when it looks like the guy is pantomime, playing pantomime. You know, I got to hear it and feel it.
Well,
And
now I'm with Kelly. Now I understand your relationship with the babies. So, Warren, I hate to do this, but we're going to take a brief pause here en Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Tenemos un invitado especial, don Warren Oree, and Kelly D. Nos acompaña en el día de hoy. Regresamos en un momento. Señores oyentes de USA la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Tenemos dos invitados especiales, doña Kelly Lee, de la ciudad de Filadelfia, directora de Artes y del Consejo de Negocios. Y también tenemos a don Warren Oree, un compositor, músico, educador, productor. This is one of those things that it would take me forever to introduce Warren and all the things that you do. But just the brief description of you being a bassist, composer, educator, producer. So, Warren, the aspect of education is so important, and it's in this country, music education has been neglected along with many other things. So, how did you get into that aspect of the music?
Well, I found that it's a very important element, and when I say music education, I don't necessarily just mean teaching you an A minor from an A sharp, or I mean education about music itself, about the impact of music, and the many mis misinformation that we get about our music, particularly our jazz music. You know, to me, jazz music is a very special type of music, a very special genre. Although I believe music is a big house with a lot of rooms, I really like that room of jazz. And unfortunately, jazz music gets a lot of inaccurate statements about it, not only from where it came from, but about who is responsible for making it what it is. And so I find it is very important to educate not only the young people but older people about the history of our music, about how important it is, about the significant role it has played, and particularly a lot of the African American uh, uh, contributors to the music have been brushed aside. I mean, even what they tried to do with Chet Baker and Miles Davis. You know, Miles Davis was on the scene for many years, and then when Chet Baker hit the scene, they act like, oh, we haven't heard any trumpet players before Chet Baker, and that was ridiculous. So, what I do is just straighten things out, I would say. Because I don't necessarily teach a person how to play the bass because, to be honest, I can't, because I learned to play the bass based on my passion, based on my desire. That's nothing I could teach someone. The only thing I would say about the music education is informing people about the true nature of the music and the power of the music. Music is such a powerful force. You can make love or war to music, believe me. And even when I was in the military, there'd be certain drum rolls that would get you, you be ready to put the bullets in your rifle and hit that line. And of course, with romance, if you got the right music on and you with somebody, you're in for a good night. You know what I mean? So it's like, uh, I believe in music education beyond the theory. I believe in music education as educating about the power and telling the truths about music and what it can do for you. And to
Yeah, so in that aspect, you are a good ambassador for the United States when you go around the world with your music, because there's no language that need to be translated,
That's right.
and so the music speaks for itself, and especially jazz that is so recognizable as especially as American music.
Yes, and I find that to be so true because I've been in countries. Well, although I do try to learn just a little bit out of respect for the country I'm in, like how to say how you doing and how's everybody. But for the most part, the music, I watch the faces of the people we're playing in. The first time we went to Brazil, it was just unbelievable the way they treated us. And see, we don't go there trying to copy the other people's music, but we do incorporate it. Uh we do acknowledge that this particular culture's music has also had an influence on us. And so you'll hear from, if you listen to some of our CDs, you'll hear us where we'll do something that has a flavor of another country based on the influence it had on us. And I see music. I remember a situation once where I think it was the New York Philharmonic went to North Korea. I mean, one of our most, distant uh, relationships that we have with any other country. And but when the New York Philharmonic went to North Korea, things were cool, even though the Korean politicians and even some of the American politicians didn't push that. When they got there, when they played that music, it just brought people together. And I find that to be. I used to do a program at the community education center where I would have interdisciplinary. So I had this one program where I had this harpist, this Italian classical harpist. And I called her, I said, look, man, look, baby, I'm gonna put you with this group called Umka and the Afro, and I heard her like, anxiety over the phone. She's like, "Oh, really?" And so I called Umka. I said, "Umka, I'm gonna have this Italian harpist play with your group." And I heard him say, "Oh yeah." I said, "Yeah." So anyway, I had their numbers. They exchanged their numbers. I get this call. Gloria is the young lady's name, the Italian harpist. Gloria called me and said, "Warren, I met Umka's wife and she gave me this best recipe and blah blah blah." Umka calls me and says, "Man, I didn't know the harp could do all of that stuff and blah blah." So it not only brought the music together, but the culture. But the caveat was when we did the concert, which was great. We had a reception, and at this reception, there's these people that came to see Gloria, primarily white, older, conservative people who like classical music, and then the people who came to see Umka with the locks and and so now they're up at this reception, and I see this one image where this short little, I guess she was an Italian lady, talking to this big tall dude with dreadlocks, and they're drinking wine, talking to each other. So you see, to me, that's the power of the music, bringing these cultures, bringing people together forgetting all of that nonsense that we've been conditioned to believe, and bringing people together as people enjoying the same thing. And I think that's invaluable. Bring that.
One of the things that I think is really exciting about watching Arpeggio, and Fernando, we saw this, when we saw him at Woodmere, is, before your introduction of a song isn't just the name of the song and who wrote the song. You, like you said, you set the record straight and you give us the history of the song. And I remember years ago, Warren, seeing you at Zanzibar Blue when it was on Spruce Street in the early 90s. So
Right.
aging myself here. And that was the first time I ever heard of a place called Bahia. You were introducing a song and you had just come back, I think, from Brazil. And you were sort of like infusing like your jazz with all of this new music. And you talked about it in such a way that I'm sure everyone at, Zanzibar Blue, felt like I did. It's like, you gave us an image of what this place could be from your introduction. And then we felt it through your music. So I think, in terms of education, it's not just about the notes. It's about, the other things that music is and how it brings people together. And you do that with your sound and with your words.
Thank you. I mean, I can't say enough how important that is, because if we just concentrate on notes, we're really missing the big picture.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I tell people now, I don't really play notes, I play sound. I play the sound, so where some cats will play the note A, I'll play the sound of A, because it gives me a lot more room to navigate. And I think, a lot of times in the audience, people don't care if you're playing an A or B flat. It's not that big of a deal. But they want to feel you, man. They want to. I'll never forget, this one cat came up to us one time. I think we were in Richmond, Virginia. This one cat came up. He says, "Man, you make me want to pray." I said, "What?" So, I mean, I'm like, wow, okay, that's a new one.
You brought religion.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But it is all very spiritual. It is all very spiritual, and this is why one of my favorite artists is John Coltrane. Not because he's a quote unquote jazz musician, but his music is very spiritual, very spiritual. And to me, that's what the music is. It just goes inside and dances with your soul, and it's a feeling that it's hard to even describe. Something, and like I say, when I first touched that bass, my baby, when I first touched her at that DeLuca's store, I knew right then my life was going to change, because I'm telling you, I was a real pirate, and my life was going to change. And even some of the pirates that I was hanging with, when I came home with this bass, they were looking at me like, "Man, what are you doing?" I said, "Man, I'm gonna play the bass." They said, "Oh man, get out of here." And this one guy, his name was Moose. I used to hang with. Moose said, "Okay." They used to call me Butch. He said, "Butch, okay, between me and you, what are you really planning on doing with this bass?" He thought I had some scheme going on. I said, "No, man." I said, "No, I'm gonna play the bass." He says, "Come on, man. What are you really?" He couldn't believe it. And years and years later, fortunately, some of those same pirates who became a little more sane, I would see them at my concerts, and they would
Right.
just look at me and shake their head. They said, "Man, I don't believe you really did this." And to me, I'm telling you, to this day, and it's been, oh, maybe what, 40 years or so I've been playing, 30, 35 years. To this day, I still can't believe it. This is why when I grab that woman and I'm holding her and plucking her, I'm still like, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you." I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, because I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't. Some of the same people that I used to go see are now either they're playing in my band or I play in their. It's crazy. I had, Sam Reed. Unfortunately, he just died a little while ago. Who was a Philly icon. He used to run this. He used to conduct the band at the Uptown Theater. So where all of the greats would come in. Sam Reed was a big cat. Now, I used to go to the Uptown to watch these shows. I was 15, again, crazy. I'm sitting in the audience just making all kinds of noise. We're drinking wine and acting foolish. Sam Reed goes to the microphone and says, "We will start as soon as somebody get these fools out of here." So, so, so now here we are, many, many years later. I said, Sam. Now Sam is playing. I had the Philadelphia Jazz Orchestra, Philadelphia Freedom Jazz and Freedom Orchestra. Sam is in my orchestra, in my orchestra. I said, Sam, I don't know if you remember, but I'm one of those fools that you said we'll start. He said, get out of here. And me and Sam became so tight, and we always laugh about that, you know. But again, the power of music, and what I tell, because I go to a lot of prisons now and talk to the young people, never say what you can't do or what won't happen. You know, you can never say that.
Well, thank you for that story. Very, very interesting, amusing. We're going to take another quick pause here in Usa la Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Warren Oree es our guest today, and Kelly D nos acompaña también. Regresamos en un momento. Bueno, señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Marlon Rodríguez dirigiendo las actividades aquí. Tenemos un invitado especial, el músico Warren Oree y nuestra compañera y amiga Kelly Lee. Warren, the personal stories is what Kelly mentioned before, that each time you introduce a song, you sort of had a story to tell us, either about the song or the composer or the musician. And you also had one of the people who played with you, very charismatic fellow. I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but he went into the audience and you said, see, that's what you do. You have the charisma to go in and touch the people close up.
Right, that's Roy Richardson is his name.
He was terrific.
Yeah, and he's a very multi-talented artist. I mean, not only does he sing, he plays flute, saxophone, and he just loves what he does, as it's so obvious. And he's not like a permanent member of the group, but I use him all the time when he's available, and for particular shows like the Bob Marley show, and we did a program on Gil Scott-Heron. And we just did one on Sam Cooke last week, and I used him for that one as well. So that's why I say I'm so fortunate to know so many talented and passionate people. And they just make it so easy. I can really have fun. I can go to the park and write my music and drink my coffee, and not worry about, oh man, I hope he gets this right. I hope, because first of all, I don't worry about that anyway. You know what I mean? It's going to be what it's going to be. You know what I mean? But it's nice to have. I call them my insurance policy. I mean, I really know working with these guys. Like my sax player, he's new to the group relatively. He's been with us about 3 years. He's from Wilmington, North Carolina. His name is Larry Price, and he just brings that southern sound, that southern soul, collard greens and ham hocks and shrimp and grits. You know, he brings that sound to the music, and I really can feel it when he blows, man. I'm like, go ahead, do your thing, brother, because I feel that. I feel all of that, and I encourage the cats. You know, there are some group leaders for whatever reason, I don't know, insecurity, whatever, that they don't want to be outshined. Like they don't want anybody in the group to get more applause than them or to sound better than them or whatever. Me, I welcome it. Come on, man, do it. Do it. Like when Miles Davis had John Coltrane in his band, you know, people used to say, you know, man, you need to get that guy out your band, John Coltrane, because he's playing too long. He sounds crazy. And Miles said, Miles said, "Just leave him alone. That's what I want. Just leave him alone. That's what I want." And you know,
Absolutely. That
and
that would
that's
be
the
like
way.
eliminating or trying not to say to someone, "Do not listen to John Lennon because he makes too much noise in the background."
Right.
So
Exactly.
um,
Exactly.
yeah, that's great. So is Coltrane one of your big influences? And you
Yes.
have, you probably have other influences besides. Also, you mentioned traveling around the world, like Brazil and that other
Hmm.
influences from other places, other musicians besides Coltrane.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Another one. A guy from India, Ravi Shankar, who he
Uh-huh.
played uh, the sitar, and it's like a 15-string guitar. And I mean, I like him. And again, I like most of these people, not so much because of the technical prowess, but because of their spirit, because of their what they give when they're performing, and how they feel. Because they're at the point where they're closing their eyes and like, for instance, something that I never do, and I don't do this out of arrogance at all, but I never ask the audience when I finish, "How did you like the band?" I never do that, because it's not that I don't care how they like the band, but because I know we're all on such personal but collective journeys when we're playing. You may not you may not be able to feel what we feel, but we hope that you're feeling something. I don't know if that makes sense. But it's so. Ravi Shankar, I first saw him when I was in France, and it blew my mind. Another cat I like is Pancho Sanchez, great percussionist from Cuba. And but one of the strongest bass players that I like is Charlie Mingus, because Charlie Mingus not only could play, you could hear Charlie playing the bass. And of course, like I said, I like a powerful bass. But
Mhm.
not only that, Charlie stood up for what he believed in. He
So,
stood
Warren,
fast.
how do you compare today's music to the way when music was when you started playing
Well,
your bass?
I think it's become too technical, you know, not enough human elements in it, too many reliance on machines and computers. I mean, I've been to some gigs where I saw cats come out with computers instead of instruments. And so they're programmed, too much programming, too much striving for perfection. That to me is ridiculous. First of all, to me, perfection is boring. If something is perfect, then there's nowhere to go. What else are you going to do? What else
Right.
Right.
can you strive for if it's perfect? Now, I believe in doing the best that you can, but I'm not going to try to be perfect. And so they use these machines to get these perfect beats, these perfect sounds, these perfect melodies, and then I'm snoring and somebody else is sleeping. You know, I remember I took a young lady once to see, I'm not going to name the band, but I took a young lady once to see this orchestra that came to the Kimmel Center. And, to me as a musician, I'm listening to them. I'm like, okay, these cats, they're cool. I mean, I wasn't jumping out my seat. I'm like, they're cool. And I asked her, well, what did you think? She said, well, we could have heard this on the CD. I mean, they had no kind of emotion. They got up to the mic and stood like zombies and played perfectly and sat down perfectly. They even sat down perfect. I'm like, dang, man, somebody trip or something. Fall off the side. You know? So I just feel there's too much striving for perfection and too much reliance on machinery and technology instead of something coming from the heart. And it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to make a so-called mistake, because back in the day, and I know we even do it now, we'll turn that mistake into something real slick. you know, we'll just make it work another kind of way. So
Yeah,
I just
jazz
feel,
always feels like that. To
yeah,
me, jazz always feels that, as you say, you're sort of moving with the spirit and not so
right,
much about the notes on the page. You just want to
exactly.
keep going with whatever you feel.
That's right. And but you got to have courage to do that. And you got to be with courageous people who are willing to do it. You know, I've been with people who were supposed to be real top notch, famous, and for whatever reason they're in my band for that particular time. And I say, okay, let's just do something in D. And they'll say, what? I say, let's play in D, man. Well, what do you want to play? Well, what do you? And I'm like, oh man, come on, you know, just blow, baby, just blow, you know. And you know, when it works well. You know, I did this thing once, another interdisciplinary thing with this young lady named Dee Wu, who's a very famous classical pianist, and I met her in Switzerland. And so we started meeting at different places around the world, and we started this little friendly thing where I said, well, she would say, well, Warren, can you play Chopin? And I said, can you play Thelonious Monk? You know, so we would have this thing going. So at the University of the Arts in 2010, our challenge came to a head where I challenged her to play some John Coltrane and some Thelonious Monk, and we called it a jazzical concert. And so you know, when we did Thelonious Monk stuff, we were rehearsing at her place in New York. So I put out the Thelonious Monk tunes. She had no problem because Thelonious Monk would write 9,000 notes. And, you know, as a classical musician, she was all for it. She said, oh, yes. So she was like, around me. Then I brought out this John Coltrane composition called Impressions, which was just based in D minor, a modal thing. She said, well, what do you want me to play, Warren? I said, well, baby, we're playing in D minor and then just go up to E flat. And she said, but what do you want me to play? And she started getting a little upset. I said, come on, baby, relax. It's cool. And so I just saw her a couple of weeks ago and we laugh about it now. It really bothered her because she had been trained, and that's another term that I don't like, but she had been trained to play only what she sees and not what she feels. And that's terrible. That's terrible.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know? So,
classically trained musicians are taught to be very disciplined, you know,
oh yeah.
obey the rules and all that. So that's the thing about jazz. It's sort of there's a great freedom to do what you do.
Yes,
So
yes.
I want to ask Kelly. Uh, so how did you actually meet Warren for the first time? How do you?
Yeah, I think it was from when I was, you know, going to Zanzibar Blue in the early 90s on Spruce Street. They played in the jazz club, and I was really lucky. Like Zanzibar Blue was centrally located between where I worked, because I was working at Jefferson University, and where I lived. So I used to go there for lunch, and they weren't open for lunch, but I used to go anyway, and they used to feed me lunch. Those Bynum brothers, you gotta love them.
Yeah.
And then I used to go back in the evenings, and you know, that was a whole new experience for me. You know, I'm in my early 20s, going to this jazz club by myself, great time, just like sitting at the bar and listening to this music. I think you were there on Thursday nights. You
Yeah.
and then Juanita Holiday used
Right.
to, you know, perform with you. And so that's how we met. And then just sort of seeing him throughout the years. And then when I started working with the Office of Arts and Culture in 2016, and we were doing Jazz Appreciation Month, you know, we wanted to make it bigger and better. And of course, you know, I called Warren, and we had this big kickoff meeting with all of these different folks involved in jazz, whether or not it was jazz education, musicians, right, jazz clubs. We had a big meeting and figured out how can we elevate Jazz Appreciation Month in Philadelphia in the month of April. And we've been working together ever since, not just in the month of April, but just throughout, because jazz is appreciated all year round. Yes. You know, not just in 1 month. And you know, his band never disappoints. You know, they, you know, because they make people feel the music, and you can put them in any, you know, any sort of location in any neighborhood, and you know, people love them.
Well,
so Warren, you have mentioned the other ensembles that you have conducted and so on. But you are interested in an outreach to the Latino community and the Asian community. So that's what one of the things Kelly mentioned, but whatever commitments you have at present is to extend your playing, your influence, your contacts to the Latino community?
Yes, well, with the Latino community, we work closely at a time with Congreso de Latinos, with bringing the sounds of what is called Latin jazz to what is called mainstream jazz. And I worked for a long time with Jesse Bermudez, and also with, matter of fact, a cat that I just worked with, Sadri, Edgardo Cintron, and you know, talking about how to blur these lines, how to blur these hard, bold lines that exist between different styles, different genres, and even different regional, even countries that exist between the music, how there is a connection. And I know one of the first to do that, which is another thing I like to clear up. Again, not knocking anybody, but everybody gives credit to Stan Getz. But it was Dizzy Gillespie who really broke that barrier between the Afro-Cuban and the jazz music. Him and a Cuban percussionist that he worked with, Chano Pozo. I mean, they really broke some records and broke through the lines on doing that. And like I said, it's not just the music that becomes a benefit that benefits from this, but it's the cultures itself. It's the trading of recipes. It's the learning each other's language. And we're doing something now with the Chinese community, and I'm really happy about. There's a guy by the name of Zhang Lu. I'm sorry if he's listening. I'm sorry, man. But he plays something called the sona, which is like a trumpet. And he came into a presentation I was giving once. He had heard about us, and he came down from Boston and brought his sona. And I really dug this cat's courage. I mean, he said, "Oh, do you mind if I?" And I said, "Well, man, I don't know what you sound like, but let's see." And I had him go out in the hallway and blow a few notes. And that's all I needed to hear. I said, "Oh, this cat is cool. He's all right." So we brought him up on stage a little later on in the concert, and he was killing it. So we found out because a number of the Asian community was there, and we found out this cat was a big deal in China. Like he was like almost like Wayne Shorter or Wynton Marsalis. And so they said, "Oh yeah, well tomorrow he's playing in New York with Yo Yo Ma." And I'm like, "Okay, this is that kind of cat. Okay, cool." So I invited him to be the featured artist on a jazz festival that we produce. My company, Lifeline Music. It's called the Philadelphia Jazz and Soul Festival, and this year we call it the Philadelphia Undefeated Jazz Festival. And so he's going to be our special guest on this festival, and it blew his mind because I had him come out to Woodmere, um, just the museum that you and Kelly were at. I had him come out when we did a blues show. We did a show on the blues, BB King and Muddy Waters and these people. And he said, "Well, man, can I?" He said, "Do we need to rehearse?" I said, "No, man, just come on out and blow your thing, man." And he was a little nervous, but he came out and see, we encouraged him. We said, "Come on, man, do it, do it." And he was blowing, and his family was there, and I mean, everybody had such a good time. And so he said he enjoyed the fact that we're making the music less scientific for him and more enjoyable. And I was glad to hear that. So
So, Warren, when and where is this undefeated jazz festival going to take place?
it'll be October the 2nd, and it'll be at a new venue. Normally, we have our festival out in the street, but because things are so back and forth, we couldn't get the street closed, and I'm not sure I even wanted it to because I knew it could change at the last minute. So we're doing it indoors at a place called South Side, which is owned by the Bynum brothers that Kelly was talking about, who own the club South. Well, next door they have a place called South Side, which is an event space now. It's for events and catering. So we will be having it there. It's at 1401 Mount Vernon Street, and it'll be from 12 o'clock to 6 p.m. and it's absolutely free. And we have the Odine Pope Trio also on board, and we're going to do a tribute to the guy I mentioned at the Uptown who said, "Get these fools out of here." Sam Reeves. We're going to do a tribute to Sam Reeves. Sam Reeves had a jam session going every Sunday at this place called the Top Shelf. So we're going to do a jam session in honor of him at this, and then as well as featuring Yaji Go from China. And already, we're told that all of this information is already all over China. And we've been invited to possibly come to China, of course, based on how the restrictions are and stuff, in November. So
That's excellent. Well, we'll promote it here.
well, thank you.
Delighted to promote your event. But in order for me to do that, you have to come back.
Well, listen, you're such a gracious host, man. How could I not? I appreciate it. I really do.
Yes, absolutely. We need at least another hour or two or a month to talk about everything that you do. So, I want to thank you very much for coming to our show. And Kelly, you have any last minute comments about Warren's music?
Well, I guess my last minute comment would be, go support live arts performances in Philadelphia. The arts really had a hard time over COVID. They lost about $1 million a day, and that's a real number, a total of $371 million. So whenever you see a live performance, go pay for it. But for those who can't pay for a live performance, go to creativephl.org. On our website, we have an access calendar, and it has free cultural events. And events like when we pay the Arpeggio Jazz Ensemble to do programming in neighborhoods and communities, those are the types of events that are on that calendar, because we just want to close the gap to access to wonderful music like the kind that Warren is producing every day. So support live arts, go out to see live arts, overpay for live arts. It is so important to Philadelphia. It's so important to our artists and musicians in Philadelphia. They're a huge part of our economy. They're a huge part of our community, and they bring joy and love. So let's support them.
Yes.
Great.
Well, let me
Thank you, Warren.
Thank you. And Kelly, thank you for this introduction to Fernando. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for your support, Kelly, for us. We don't take
Thank you both for coming on our show. Señores oyentes de Usa la Radio, se despide Fernando Méndez. Kelly Lee nos acompañó el día de hoy en una entrevista con el músico, compositor, educador Warren Oree. Muchas gracias por su sintonía. Los esperamos hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Méndez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.